You won't believe what just happened in my neighborhood. My neighbor, the so-called perfect HOA president, built a massive mansion on my property and even stole my electricity. Every day I watched her flaunt what was rightfully mine, and the rules she twisted to cover her greed left me furious. But I didn't just sit back, and trust me, what happened next will shock you. Before I continue, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss every twist of this jaw-dropping story. Now, imagine fighting someone with all the power, the community behind her, and the law seeming to side with her. Could I take back what was mine, or would I lose everything?
Life in my quiet suburban neighborhood used to feel perfect. Every morning, the sun would glint off our small, well-kept lawn, and my family would enjoy breakfast on the porch, waving to neighbors as they walked their dogs. I loved the routine, the comforting rhythm of community life, where everyone seemed friendly and no one ever crossed any boundaries. I had worked hard for my little corner of this world, investing not just money, but years of love and care into my home. From weekend gardening sessions to hosting small barbecues with neighbors, it was more than a house. It was our sanctuary. My kids ran around freely, our dog barked happily at passing joggers, and life felt simple, predictable, and safe. But beneath the neatly trimmed hedges and polished sidewalks, tensions were quietly simmering. There was one neighbor who never quite fit the idyllic picture, the HOA president, a woman with a sharp tongue and an eye for rules, always lurking, always watching. At first, her little comments seemed harmless, just the odd complaint about lawn height or paint color, but there was something in her gaze, a subtle intensity, a hint of control that didn't belong in a place like this. Little did I know, those small, innocent observations were just the opening act. Soon, what seemed like trivial HOA regulations would spiral into a nightmare, threatening everything my family had built. And it all started with one simple, absurd rule.
It started subtly. At first, it was a slip of a letter in my mailbox, an official-looking notice from the HOA, thinly veiled as a friendly reminder about my non-compliant landscaping. My rose bushes were apparently too tall, and the walkway pavers slightly misaligned. The language seemed harmless, almost bureaucratic, but the tone was sharp and precise, as if every word was crafted to unsettle me. I felt my stomach knot, a tiny seed of unease sprouting. The next week, I noticed her, the HOA president, standing at the edge of my property, clipboard in hand, watching every move I made. The neighborly smiles and waves I had once enjoyed were replaced with stifling scrutiny. Every lawn chair, every garden ornament, even the color of my front door seemed to invite critique. Every interaction was tinged with tension, a subtle power struggle I hadn't anticipated. Then came the fines, small at first, almost laughable, $20, $50, $70 for minor infractions that barely existed. But they kept piling up, like drops of water eroding a stone. Each fine came with a tone of inevitability, a sense that I was being pushed toward a corner, forced to comply or suffer the consequences. The harassment became more direct. One evening I returned home to find a bright orange notice stapled to my gate, violation of HOA rules, unauthorized construction. My blood ran cold. What construction? I hadn't touched anything in weeks. Panic set in, mingled with anger. I tried to explain, but emails went unanswered, calls ignored. Each attempt to communicate seemed only to trigger more scrutiny. Neighbors I had trusted began whispering, subtly aligning with the HOA's narrative. Casual remarks turned into pointed accusations. I heard you breaking the rules. Maybe you should check the HOA guidelines. The line between neighborly concern and orchestrated intimidation blurred. Every glance felt judgmental, every conversation strained. I realized the fight wasn't just about my property. It was about control, about someone asserting dominance in my life and community. Then came the electricity incident. One night, the power flickered and then went out entirely. After hours of calls and confusion, I discovered the shocking truth. My HOA president had tapped into my electricity, redirecting it to her massive construction project. My jaw dropped. My sense of security, already fragile, shattered completely. How could someone do this? The audacity was staggering, the injustice unbearable. I refused to back down. Late nights were spent researching HOA bylaws, documenting every interaction, every notice, every violation they tried to invent. I confronted the board in meetings, my voice shaking but determined. Each confrontation felt like stepping into a storm, but I couldn't let fear win. The HOA president sneered, wielding rules like weapons, dismissing my evidence with a smirk. But every act of resistance only escalated the tension. Notices grew more aggressive, deadlines shorter, fines higher. Surveillance cameras appeared pointed directly at my driveway. Letters arrived in thick envelopes, legally worded and ominous. The board painted me as the problem, the rule breaker, the troublemaker, and the community, once my sanctuary, felt like a minefield. Just when I thought I could catch a break, a shocking discovery threw everything into chaos. Construction crews, working on her mansion, were encroaching even closer onto my property than I had imagined. Trees, shrubs, and even part of my fence were now in jeopardy. The sheer audacity left me speechless. And in the back of my mind, one question gnawed relentlessly. How far would she go? With my property, my electricity, and even my peace of mind under siege, I realized the situation had escalated beyond petty HOA disputes. This wasn't just about rules or fines, it was a battle for justice, for control, for dignity. And in the next few weeks, everything I had built, everything I thought I knew about my neighborhood, would be put to the ultimate test. Could I fight back without losing everything? Or had I underestimated the cunning and audacity of the person who had infiltrated my life so completely?
By now, the tension had reached a breaking point. My property had been under constant siege, my family stressed, and the neighborhood that once felt like a sanctuary now resembled a battlefield. Every glance from neighbors seemed loaded with judgment. Every phone call from the HOA felt like a trap. The absurdity of their rules had escalated to criminal audacity. The electricity theft, the encroachment, the fines piling up like an avalanche. I remember standing at the edge of my lawn one evening, staring at the massive structure of her mansion looming over my property. Every beam, every wall, every extravagant window felt like a slap in the face, a monument built on my patience, my frustration, and my rightful land. I clenched my fists, and for the first time I felt something ignite inside me. I would not be bullied, cheated, or silenced. Determined, I gathered every piece of evidence I had collected over months: photographs, documents, receipts, and recordings. I meticulously reviewed the HOA bylaws, local property laws, and previous rulings on similar disputes. Every step I had taken, every fine I had contested, every polite attempt at reason, they all led to this moment. This was the confrontation where the balance of power could finally shift. The HOA board meeting was scheduled, and the tension in the room was palpable. Chairs creaked, papers rustled, and the air felt thick with anticipation. When I walked in, heads turned, whispers circled, and I could see her, the HOA president, smiling with that smug confidence, as if victory was already hers. But this time, I wasn't just defending my property, I was demanding justice. I began to speak, my voice steady but filled with controlled fury. I have documented every interaction, every fine, every unlawful action taken against my property. I have evidence of electricity theft, property encroachment, and harassment, and today I will show it all. Her eyes flickered, not the calm, confident gaze she had worn for months, but a flash of unease. The room seemed to lean in as I laid out each violation, each abuse of power, every rule she had twisted to serve her selfish agenda. Members of the board shifted uncomfortably. Whispers turned into murmurs. And just when I thought the tension couldn't rise any higher, I revealed the photos showing her construction actually crossing onto my land, a blatant violation that even her carefully drafted bylaws couldn't cover. At that moment, a legal consultant I had quietly brought into the meeting stood up. According to municipal law, any construction on another's property without consent is unlawful. All fines imposed for supposed violations on this property are invalid retroactively. Furthermore, misuse of utilities constitutes theft under state law. The room went silent. Every mouth hung open, every eye widened. Her confident facade began to crumble. I could see the beads of sweat forming on her forehead, the color draining from her face. The neighbors who had once avoided me now stared in stunned silence, the scales of perception beginning to shift. And right then, I paused, letting the moment hang. "Before we continue," I said, smiling wryly at the camera of the consultant recording for official evidence, "if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss the fallout from what happens next." Her smirk faltered. The power she had wielded so mercilessly for months through intimidation, manipulation, and rule-bending was now slipping through her fingers. Every accusation she had thrown at me backfired as I presented timelines, invoices, and witness testimonies. The board had no choice but to confront the truth. The so-called perfect HOA president had been exposed. The tension exploded when I revealed the final piece of evidence, a video showing her construction crew diverting electricity from my property to power her mansion. The room gasped audibly. Her voice trembled as she tried to deny it, but the footage was undeniable. The board had no choice but to acknowledge the theft and encroachment. Members exchanged awkward glances. Some whispered apologies. Others avoided eye contact entirely. I could feel the vindication coursing through me, but I also knew that emotions were still raw. This was not just about winning, it was about holding someone accountable for months of abuse. As the board officially reversed the fines, ordered the illegal encroachment removed, and referred the electricity theft to local authorities, I realized that months of frustration, sleepless nights, and quiet suffering had finally led to this climactic triumph. Yet even in victory, the adrenaline surged. The HOA president, stripped of her authority, tried one last desperate maneuver, shouting, interrupting, blaming the system, but no one listened. Her reputation, built on intimidation and control, crumbled in that one room, and for the first time in months, I could breathe freely, knowing that justice, slow but inevitable, had arrived. As I walked out of the meeting, the weight of months lifted from my shoulders. My family's home was safe again, our property respected, our peace restored. The neighbors, once skeptical or indifferent, now approached with cautious congratulations. But I knew this wasn't just a story about fines, electricity, or fences. It was a lesson in courage, perseverance, and standing up to abuse, no matter how overwhelming it seems. And yet, as I looked at the mansion that once loomed so arrogantly over my land, I realized this was only the beginning. There were repairs to make, boundaries to reclaim, and a community to rebuild. But the most important victory had already been won. The truth had come out, and the abuse was exposed. The question lingered, powerful and unresolved. Could anyone truly feel safe when the very rules meant to protect a community were twisted for personal gain?
After the climactic confrontation, life slowly began to return to normal, or as normal as it could be after months of chaos. The first step was reclaiming my property. The HOA's illegal encroachment was officially ordered removed, and construction crews were forced to retreat from the boundaries of my land. I watched with a mix of relief and disbelief as the fences were repaired, the shrubs replanted, and the clear lines of my property restored. Every corner I had carefully tended now felt like it belonged to me again. The electricity theft, once a quiet, hidden abuse, had been officially investigated and rectified. New meters were installed, each cable double-checked for integrity. The thought that someone had secretly been siphoning power from my home left a lingering chill, but seeing the corrections made brought an overwhelming sense of security. My home, my sanctuary, was mine once again. And for the first time in months, I could walk into each room without a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. What surprised me most was the reaction of the neighborhood. The once aloof or quietly complicit neighbors now approached with a mixture of admiration, respect, and curiosity. Conversations that had been tense or non-existent began to reopen, this time with honesty and empathy. Some apologized for not seeing what had been happening, acknowledging they had felt powerless or afraid to speak up. Others shared similar stories of subtle HOA overreach or neighborly intimidation, admitting they had been silently enduring. The HOA itself was shaken. The president was removed from her position, her influence over board decisions severely curtailed. Policies were rewritten, with stricter oversight to prevent similar abuses in the future. I attended the next board meeting, not as an adversary, but as a voice of caution and accountability, sharing my experience to ensure the community remained fair and just. My role had shifted from victim to advocate, a responsibility I embraced fully. Beyond property and power, the victory carried a profound personal significance. The months of stress, sleepless nights, and constant fear had pushed me to my limits, forcing me to discover strengths I had never fully realized. Patience, persistence, and meticulous attention to detail had become my tools, courage, my armor. The ordeal had transformed me from a homeowner wary of confrontation into someone capable of standing firm against injustice, no matter how intimidating the opposition. Yet the journey was not without lingering scars. I realized how easily power could be abused, how quickly a seemingly benign system could be weaponized for personal gain. The experience left me more vigilant, more aware of the fragility of fairness, and more determined to protect my rights, not just for myself, but for others who might face similar abuse. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. The children played freely once again in the yard. The dog ran across the lawn without fear, and neighbors greeted each other with genuine smiles. Yet the story remained a cautionary tale, a reminder that even in the most idyllic neighborhoods, rules and authority could be manipulated for personal gain. I began sharing my experience with others through community newsletters, social media, and casual conversations, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, documentation, and standing up to intimidation. It became clear that the conflict, while deeply personal, had broader implications. The HOA, previously unchallenged, now operated with transparency and accountability. Policies were revised to include stricter checks, ensuring that no single person could wield unchecked power again. My battle had not only restored my home, but had fundamentally improved the structure of the community. In a sense, the struggle had elevated the neighborhood itself. Standing on my front porch one evening, I watched the sun dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the lawn I had fought so hard to protect. The house that once seemed threatened by greed and manipulation now stood resilient, just like the family within it. I realized that the true victory wasn't just in reclaiming land or reversing fines, but in preserving dignity, maintaining integrity, and refusing to be silenced by fear. This story is a reminder that injustice, no matter how quietly executed, can be confronted and corrected. The most powerful tools we possess are vigilance, preparation, and the courage to act. Change may take time, patience, and perseverance, but it is possible.
And while not every battle will end perfectly, the act of standing up sends ripples far beyond the immediate conflict, impacting communities, setting precedents, and inspiring others to resist oppression. As I looked around, I reflected on the journey, from intimidation, fear, and helplessness to triumph, empowerment, and restored peace. I realized that the battle had left an indelible mark, not just on the property or the HOA, but on me as a person. It had proven that one determined individual could confront systemic abuse, challenge authority, and emerge victorious. So I ask you, watching this story unfold, what would you do if your home, your sanctuary, was threatened by someone abusing power? Would you fight, stay silent, or find your own way to reclaim justice? Because sometimes the smallest acts of courage can spark the most profound changes, and your voice, your determination, and your persistence can turn the tide, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The neighborhood, once tense and divided, now had a renewed sense of fairness. Fences were restored, lawns flourished, and the community finally embraced a culture of accountability. The HOA president, stripped of power, was left to witness the community she had sought to control, now thriving without her. And I, having endured the storm, knew that no matter what came next, I had the strength, the resolve, and the knowledge to protect what mattered most. In the end, it wasn't just about winning a property dispute. It was about standing firm against manipulation, confronting abuse, and proving that justice, no matter how delayed, is achievable.